Chapter 1. The Intake. The last time Felix Holloway moved his hands voluntarily was 11 days ago, and it had been to sign a delegation order transferring the management of the Eastern Quarter to a deputy he had not yet appointed. Oswald noticed. Oswald noticed everything. 400 years of noticing was, at this point, less a skill than a medical condition. "You've been sitting in that chair for 6 hours, Oswald said from the doorway. "I am resting." "You don't sleep." "Then I am sitting." "You said last week that your schedule was complete." Felix considered this. His hands did not move on the desk. His black band ring caught the lamplight, the only thing about him that seemed to have any interest in being visible. "It is complete." "Your schedule runs through 2087. "Then it has completed early. Efficiency should be rewarded, Oswald, not questioned." Oswald stared at him. Felix did not stare back. Felix did not, at the moment, appear to be looking at anything at all. "I've arranged the appointment," Oswald said. "Tomorrow evening, 8 o'clock. "I have declined the appointment." "You declined the first two. The council has made this one non-optional." "The council does not dictate my—" "They invoked the clause of competence. You attend the therapeutic evaluation, or they open fitness hearings." Oswald paused. "I am told the hearings involve paperwork." Felix's jaw tightened. It was the only movement he'd made in 6 hours that Oswald hadn't prompted. "Who is the therapist?" "Dr. Ruth Ashmore, vampire, approximately 180 years old, specializes in immortality-related therapeutic concerns." "There is no such specialty." "She invented it." Felix turned his ring. Once. Slowly. "The previous two therapists resigned," he said. "Yes. This one will also resign. She has a reputation for not doing that. Then she has not met me." "No," Oswald said, and there was something careful in his voice, something that had been careful for months. "She hasn't." Ruth Ashmore's practice occupied the second floor of a building in the Old Quarter that looked, from the outside, like a dentist's office. This was intentional. The waiting room had 3 chairs, a water cooler, and a single framed print of a landscape that was aggressively inoffensive. She was reviewing the intake file. The NDA was 12 pages. The fee was a single wire transfer for 20 sessions, prepaid. Under previous therapeutic attempts, 2, both terminated by provider. Under date of birth, circa 1320. Under presenting concerns, none. Under emergency contact, blank. Ruth set the file down. She'd been doing this for 93 years. She'd had clients who were older, angrier, more creative in their avoidance. She'd had a 400-year-old who spoke exclusively in 14th century Occitan for 6 sessions because he believed she wouldn't understand it. Her Occitan was fine. She had never had a client whose intake form was this precisely, comprehensively unhelpful. She checked the clock. 7:45. He was early. Felix Holloway was sitting in the waiting room with the posture of someone who had been sitting in rooms for 700 years and had opinions about all of them. He was holding a leather-bound notebook. His black band ring glinted on his right hand, old enough that it might have been one of the original batch. He stood when she opened the door. The motion was precise and completely devoid of fidget. He simply went from sitting to standing, as though someone had pressed a button. "Dr. Ashmore." "Mr. Holloway, come in." He sat. He opened the notebook to a page that was already written on. "Before we begin," he said, "I have reviewed the therapeutic literature on cognitive behavioral approaches and prepared responses to the most commonly asked intake questions. I thought this might save time." Ruth looked at the notebook. It was organized by category. There were tabs. The tabs were color-coded. "You color-coded your therapy preparation." Organization is, if you say adequate, we're going to have a very short relationship. He closed his mouth, opened it, closed it again. "You've prepared answers," she said. "Yes." "Most clients prepare excuses. You've prepared answers." She let that sit. "Which tells me you think there are right answers to therapy." There are right answers to most things. Not to this. I find that unlikely. You will. She opened her own notebook. Tell me why you're here. The council mandated. I read the file. I'm asking you. What do you think is wrong? Nothing is wrong. Your intake form says presenting concerns, none. It also says you've been through 2 therapists, you've delegated your entire portfolio, and your emergency contact field is blank. I have been my own emergency contact for 700 years. That's not how emergency contacts work. It has been adequate. She wrote something. He watched her write with 7 centuries of attention, compressed into a gaze that didn't blink. You keep using that word, she said. Adequate. You've used it 3 times in 4 minutes. That word is doing a lot of work in your vocabulary. Felix turned his ring. You do that when you're avoiding something, she said. He stopped, started again. You just did it again when I pointed it out, which means you know you do it. She wrote another note. That's useful. I did not come here to be worked with. You came here because the alternative was fitness hearings, which involve paperwork. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, a ghost memory of one. Oswald told you that. Oswald's referral notes were very thorough. Oswald's referral notes are an act of treason I have chosen to overlook. He mentioned you've stopped feeding properly. Cold blood bags. You don't warm them. Felix's jaw tightened. Oswald's referral notes are an act of high treason. Mr. Holloway, you are not the most difficult client I've ever had, but you are the most prepared, and that preparation is telling me something. What is it telling you? That you think therapy is a problem to be solved, that if you prepare well enough, you can complete the process without it ever actually touching you. She paused. I had a client once, 400 years old, who spent 6 sessions speaking exclusively in 14th century Occitan because he believed I wouldn't understand it. Did you? I grew up in 1840s Marseille. My Occitan is fine. She leaned back. He was also trying to solve therapy without being touched by it. He ran out of Occitan before I ran out of patience. You will run out of categories before I run out of questions. That seems unlikely. You've known me for 20 minutes. I've been doing this for 93 years. I have more questions than you have categories. He regarded her. The quality of his attention shifted. Still total, still unblinking, but recalibrated, as though he had upgraded his assessment of the opponent. This is not a negotiation, she said, reading the recalibration. There is no counterparty. There is only you, in a chair, being honest. I am being honest. You haven't blinked in 4 minutes. I'm going to need you to blink. He blinked. It was deliberate, mechanical, and approximately 200 years too late to pass as natural. Last question for tonight. Why do you think the last 2 therapists quit? The managed mode settled like a mask. They found the work insufficient. No. Why do you think they quit? Nothing came out. It was the first honest thing he'd done since he sat down. That's interesting, she said. We'll start there next time. Oswald was reorganizing the glove compartment for the 3rd time. Felix got in. How did it go? She is direct. Good. Did she ask you anything difficult? She asked why the previous therapists resigned. I did not have an answer. He looked at his hands. She also told me to blink. Were you not blinking? Apparently not. For how long? She said 4 minutes. Oswald adjusted the rearview mirror. What else? She said I used the word adequate as a deflection. She counted the instances, 3 in 4 minutes. Is she right? The word is accurate. That's not what I asked. Felix turned his ring. Oswald watched him turn it. He had seen that gesture 10,000 times in 400 years, and until tonight, he had never known it was diagnostic. She noticed the ring, Felix said. What about it? She said I turn it when I'm avoiding something. You do. You never mentioned it. I thought you knew. I did not know, he paused. She knew in 20 minutes. Oswald let that sit. Then, when is the next session? Thursday. Will you go? Felix was quiet. Outside, the city did what cities did. Moved, breathed, existed in its usual way, indifferent to the fact that a 700-year-old king was sitting in a car trying to decide whether a woman he'd met for 45 minutes was worth going back to. She said there were no right answers, he said. I find this implausible, but I have not yet disproved it. Is that a yes? It is an undetermined. Oswald started the car. He made a note to look up the word undetermined later. He suspected it was going to become important. Chapter 2. The Homework. Session 3 was the report. It was 7 pages, single-spaced, footnotes, bibliography, appendix. The cover page read, Reflective Journal Entry, Week 2. A structured analysis of emotional states observed during the period of March 14th to 21st, with reference to established taxonomies of affect. This is a report, Ruth said. It is a journal. A journal has feelings in it. This has footnotes. Those aren't the same thing. I fail to see the distinction. Ruth flipped to page 4. There was a pie chart, one color, labeled adequate. Your entire emotional pie chart is one color. Yes. And that color is adequate. It seemed the most accurate. There's also an appendix. Appendix A contains a glossary of therapeutic terminology I encountered during my research. I noticed several of your intake questions use terms with multiple clinical definitions, and I wanted to ensure we were operating from the same, Felix, framework. You wrote a glossary for your therapist. Precision prevents miscommunication. She set the report down. I asked you to write about a moment this week when you felt something unexpected. You gave me a comparative analysis with a bibliography that cites 3 sources from the 1400s. The Gutenberg Press was a significant development in... We're not talking about the Gutenberg Press. You asked about my experience this week. I experienced the Gutenberg Press. In the 1400s. The memory of it. Yes, I was in Mainz. The ink smelled of linseed. The assignment was about this week. He turned his ring, once, slowly. This week was adequate. Ruth wrote a single word in her notebook and underlined it twice. Session 3.5. Tell me about your day, Ruth said. Not a report, not an analysis, just what happened, like you're telling a friend. The silence that followed was 700 years wide. I do not do that. Talk to friends? I have colleagues. I have subordinates. I have a chief of staff who leaves books on my desk with highlighted passages and then pretends he hasn't. But not friends. Friendship requires... He stopped, started again. Friendship is an investment of... He stopped again. You can't finish that sentence because you were about to describe friendship as a transaction. I was going to say time. No, you weren't. I might have been. You were going to say resources or strategic alignment. I've seen your intake form. You described your relationship to your court as operational. It is operational. Your chief of staff buys self-help books and highlights passages for you. That's not operational. That's friendship. Felix's ring turned. Oswald is performing his duties. Oswald is worried about you. Those are different things. They are the same thing performed by the same person. They are not the same thing. One is a job, the other is someone who cares about you. Do you know the difference? He didn't answer. That's not a rhetorical question. I understand the conceptual difference, but not the felt difference. I don't... He stopped. His ring went still. No, I don't know the felt difference. Okay, she said, more gently. That's honest. I would prefer to be useful without being honest. I know. That's the problem. Session 4. The Feelings Wheel. She'd given him a printout, emotions organized in a circle, primary in the center, secondary in the next ring, tertiary at the edges, standard clinical tool. He returned it with annotations. You've graded my feelings wheel, Ruth said. I have offered corrections. Nostalgia is filed under joy. It is not joy. It is loss wearing a pleasant hat. A pleasant hat. Furthermore, the wheel does not account for any emotional state that develops over a period longer than a human lifetime. Where is the specific weariness of attending the same political argument for 4 centuries? That's not on the wheel because I have prepared an alternative. He handed her a sheet, 3 sections: adequate, inadequate, undetermined. Undetermined is not an emotion, Felix. It is the most honest thing on the wheel. You hand drew a feelings wheel with 3 emotions and brought it to therapy. That required choosing to spend time on something. He turned his ring. Which section would you put this conversation in? He looked at her for a long time. Undetermined. Good. We're coming back to this. I would prefer that we did not. Noted. Declined. Between sessions 4 and 5, Oswald noticed things. First, the microwave. It had not been used in 9 years. Felix consumed blood bags cold, directly from the refrigerator, the way a person might eat a granola bar they required for continued biological function but did not enjoy. Ruth had told him to feed properly, that cold bags were the equivalent of eating nothing but crackers. Oswald stood in the kitchen doorway and watched Felix remove a blood bag from the microwave, test the temperature against the inside of his wrist, and pour it into a glass. Are you warming blood bags? The temperature was affecting the nutritional content. The temperature has never affected the nutritional. Oswald. It is a well-established fact that Oswald looked at the glass, at Felix, at the microwave. Of course, the temperature. He wrote in his journal, warmed blood. Someone told him to take care of himself, and he listened. Second, Oswald noticed Felix getting dressed for session 5, the same dark jacket, but he brushed the shoulders, checked the cuffs, polished the black band ring with his thumb. You're polishing your ring, Oswald said. It was tarnished. It has not been tarnished in 400 years. Then it was overdue. Third, Oswald's phone buzzed. A text from Ruth. They had exchanged numbers after she'd asked about Felix's feeding habits. Has he been warming the blood bags? Yes, he said the temperature was affecting the nutritional content. The temperature doesn't affect anything. I am aware. He knows I'm aware. He warmed it anyway. A long pause, then, good. Then, how does he seem? Oswald looked at the kitchen, where Felix was reading the back of the blood bag label with the focused attention of a man who was rediscovering that labels existed. He's reading the ingredients on the blood bag, Oswald typed. He has not read anything in 11 months. Before this, it was 14 meta-analyses on CBT. Before the meta-analyses, it was her published papers. He read my papers? All of them. He has notes. A very long pause. Tell him not to bring the notes to session 5. I believe he has already laminated them. Session 5. She'd assigned homework. Notice one thing this week that catches your attention. Felix handed her a single sheet. She read it. It was an observational report, detailed, precise. It described the specific rhythm of her pen tapping during sessions. 3 quick taps, followed by a pause, repeated when she was formulating a question. 2 slow taps when she was considering his answer. 1 single tap when she'd caught him deflecting. This is about me, Ruth said. You asked me to notice something that caught my attention. I meant something in your life. You are in my life. You are in it every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 o'clock. You tap your pen in 3 distinct patterns. You push your hair behind your ear with your left hand. always the left. You have a book on your shelf, Montaigne's Essays, in a translation that contains 37 errors in the first 4 chapters. Ruth set the paper down. I read the original, he said. In 1672. I have brought the correct translation. This is not a gift, it is a correction. He placed a book on the table between them. Leather-bound, old. The kind of book that smelled like centuries. Felix, the homework was supposed to help you reconnect with the world outside this room. It has. With something outside this room that isn't me. He looked at her. The managed composure was fully in place. 7 centuries of diplomatic training holding every feature exactly where it should be. But behind it, something had shifted. The way a heavy piece of furniture shifts when the floor underneath it changes. Imperceptible unless you were looking for it. Ruth was looking for it. We'll try different homework next week, she said. I found the pen tapping genuinely interesting. That's the problem. She said it too quickly. She heard herself say it and knew immediately that it had been too quick, too honest. And the look on his face, the barely perceptible change, the fractional widening of focus, told her he'd heard it too. Next week, she said. Chapter 3. The Shift. Session 6. The Bread. She brought a rough loaf, coarse flour, too much salt, medieval peasant bread. She set it on the table. I want you to hold it. Why? Because you told me you can't remember the last time you felt something. I want to know if that's true. He picked up the bread. Something happened. A ghost sensation, the scrape of rough grain against the heel of a child's palm. A kitchen that smelled of smoke and yeast. A century that had been dark and cold, and over before he'd understood it had begun. His hands closed around the bread, his jaw tightened, the flash in his eyes, amber bleeding into brown. He set it down, carefully, as though it had done something to him that he had not authorized. You're angry, she said. Yes. Good. That is not good. Anger is a feeling. You said you didn't have those. You were wrong. He stared at her, the managed mode stripped away for 3 seconds, long enough for her to see what was underneath. Then it reassembled, slower than usual. What kind of bread is it? He said. Pain de campagne? Where did you buy it? She told him. He nodded once. He did not mention the bread again that session. But Ruth noticed. For the rest of the hour, his hands were not flat on the chair arms. They were curled, holding a shape that was no longer there. Session 7. Something changed. It wasn't the bread. It wasn't the homework. It was that Felix asked her a question. Not a deflection question. Not a counter question designed to redirect. A real question. About her. She'd mentioned, briefly in passing, while explaining a clinical framework, that she'd worked with a young vampire in the 1970s who'd been turned against his will. What happened to him? Felix said. That's not relevant to, you mentioned him. Your voice changed when you did. I would like to know what happened. Ruth paused. Therapists didn't talk about their other clients. Therapists didn't talk about themselves. But Felix was looking at her with 7 centuries of total attention, the kind of attention that noticed pen-tapping patterns and translation errors, and the specific hand she used to push back her hair. And the quality of it was different from anything she'd encountered in 93 years of practice. Most clients looked at her the way you look at a tool, useful, necessary, professional. Felix looked at her the way you look at a person you are trying to understand. He's fine, she said. He's in Lisbon. He sends me a postcard every decade. A postcard? It's our thing. You have a thing with a former client? I have a thing with a person I helped 50 years ago who still remembers. That's why I do this. Felix was quiet. Then, you keep postcards? I keep every one. From all of them? From the ones who write. He looked at her, at the shelf behind her, where the Montaigne sat, next to a small stack of what he now recognized were postcards, held together with a rubber band. from vampires she had helped, across decades, written in handwriting that spanned centuries of penmanship. "You care about your clients," he said, not as a question. "Yes." "All of them?" "Yes." "Even the ones with color-coded notebooks and single-color pie charts?" "Especially those." Something moved across his face. Not the managed mode, not the composure. Something underneath it. The look of a man who had just been told something he did not know how to file. Sessions 8 and 9. The sessions stopped being sessions. They were still structured. Ruth still took notes. Felix still arrived 15 minutes early. But the quality of the conversation had changed. He asked about her practice, how she'd started. Why vampires? Why not humans? She told him, because nobody else was doing it, and because a creature that lives forever deserves someone to talk to about what that means. He asked about her human life. She'd been a nurse, 1840s, turned by a woman named Theodora who had fitted the first black band ring on her finger 3 days later and said, "The sun is yours. Don't waste it." "Theodora is still alive?" Felix asked. "She sends me a postcard every decade." "What does she write?" The last one said, "Still wasting the sun? Love, T." It was from Lisbon. "You keep it." "I keep all of them. 30 postcards. 170 years of someone checking in." "That's a long time to check in." "That's what it means to care about someone, Felix. You don't stop because it's been long enough." He was very still. Not the ancient stillness, the listening stillness. The stillness of a man who was filing something important in a place he could find it later. Session 9. He brought the notes. "Your 2019 paper on immortality-related existential fatigue was methodologically rigorous," he said. "Your sample size was, however, inadequate." "Did you just peer review my research?" "I offered corrections." "You peer-reviewed your therapist's research on immortality. You, a 700-year-old immortal, peer-reviewed my paper on immortality." "I have relevant domain experience." "You gave me a 3 on the Holloway scale of clinical rigor." "It is a fair assessment." "You invented the Holloway scale of clinical rigor." "It filled a gap in the existing literature." "What does a 10 look like on the Holloway scale?" "I have not yet encountered a 10. "What would it take?" He considered this. A larger sample size, more longitudinal data, and a methodology section that does not begin with, "This study attempts." Either it does or it doesn't. "You have opinions about my methodology section." "I have opinions about most things. It is a consequence of having 700 years of accumulated opinions with no appropriate outlet. That's why you're in therapy." "That is one reason I am in therapy." The way he said "one," the specific weight on it, the slight pause before and after, the way his eyes held hers, told her everything the sentence didn't say. She stared at him. Then she laughed, not the controlled almost laugh, but a real one, startled out of her, and his face did the thing it had started doing when she laughed. The faint arrest, the caught stillness of a man hearing a sound he wanted to hear again. "You're looking at me," she said. "Yes. You've been looking at me differently for 3 sessions." He turned his ring. "I have been attending to the therapeutic relationship." "That's not what you're doing." "What am I doing?" She held his gaze. "You tell me." He didn't answer, but the ring turned faster, and it was always when he was looking at her. Between sessions 9 and 10, Oswald asked the question. It was in the car. Felix was looking out the window, but not the way he'd been looking for the past 11 months. He was noticing things. A bakery with a lit sign. A woman laughing on a phone. The specific quality of the streetlight through the rain on the windshield. "Felix," Oswald said. "Yes." "Are you in love with your therapist?" The silence was precisely the width of one man realizing something he should have realized 4 sessions ago. "That is an absurd..." He stopped. The ring turned. Define love. I am going to need more highlighters, Oswald said. That is not a definition. It's all I have. Oswald, I am not... Felix stopped again. He looked at his hands, the hands that had been motionless for months and were now gripping the armrest with the quiet intensity of a man who has been asked a question he cannot answer with a 7-page report. I look forward to the sessions, he said, carefully, as though each word was a diplomatic concession. Yes. I have read her published work. I have brought corrections. Yes. I have noticed things about her that are not clinically relevant. Such as? She pushes her hair behind her ear with her left hand. She taps her pen in 3 distinct patterns. She keeps postcards from former clients held together with a rubber band that is blue and slightly frayed. She was a nurse. She was turned by a woman named Theodora who gave her the son. He paused. She laughs as though she has forgotten that she can, and then remembers and is surprised by it. Felix. I have been alive for 700 years, and I cannot recall the last time I looked forward to something. Oswald pulled the car over. He did not trust himself to drive and have this conversation at the same time. That, he said, is not attending to the therapeutic relationship. No, Felix said, very quietly. It is not. Session 10. The touch. She was writing notes. He was watching her write. The pen, the hand, the precise tilt of her wrist. You're watching my hands again, she said without looking up. Yes. That's the 4th session in a row. I am aware. She set the pen down. Felix, we need to talk about what's happening in this room. What is happening in this room? You're arriving earlier. You're bringing me things, books, corrections, annotations on my own research. You're asking about my life. You remember everything I've said. She stopped. You're engaging, which is what I wanted. But the way you're engaging is not therapeutic. Not entirely. He looked at her. The managed mode was there. Faint, structural, the scaffolding of 7 centuries. But it was transparent now. She could see through it to the man underneath. And the man underneath was not sitting in a therapy chair. He was sitting across from a woman he had been studying with, the total attention of a creature that had stopped studying anything and had started again because of her. I have not been touched voluntarily in 47 years, he said. She went still. That is not a bid for sympathy. It is a clinical observation. You ask me to notice things. I have noticed that when your hand is near mine, when you take a paper from me, when you pass the pen, when your fingers brush the edge of the book I bring, I notice. I notice in a way I have not noticed anything in a very long time. Felix, I am not asking you to touch me. I am telling you that the noticing is significant. The room was very quiet. 2 vampires, neither breathing, neither needing to, and the silence between them was not the dead silence of a creature who had stopped caring. It was the alive silence of 2 people on the edge of something they both knew they should not name. Ruth reached across the table. She placed her hand on top of his. His skin was cold, the same temperature as hers, both of them the same species of still. But the contact was warm in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. His ring pressed against her palm. He didn't move. Not the ancient predator stillness, a different kind. The stillness of a man who was afraid that if he moved, this would stop. 47 years, she said. Yes. That's too long. It was adequate. No. Her voice was not entirely steady. It wasn't. She held his hand for 10 seconds. 15. Then she withdrew, gently. The professional boundary reassembling like a wall being rebuilt 1 brick at a time, while both architects knew it was going to come down again. Same time Thursday, she said. Yes, he said. And for the first time in 700 years, the word sounded like a promise. The session 11, Thursday, 8 p.m. Felix arrived 15 minutes early. He did not bring the notebook. He did not bring a book or a correction. or an annotated feelings wheel. He sat in the waiting room with his hands on his knees and his ring catching the light, and an expression that Oswald, watching from the car, could not categorize with any of the therapeutic vocabulary he had acquired over 3 months of desperate reading. Ruth opened the door. She saw his face. Something in her clinical training registered a warning. Not danger, not crisis. Something else. Something that looked like a man who had arrived at a conclusion and was not yet sure what to do with it. "Come in," she said. He sat. She sat. She opened her notebook. "Before we start, how was the homework this week?" "I did not do the homework." She looked up. In 11 sessions, he had never not done the homework. He had done it wrong, the 7-page report, the annotated feelings wheel, the observational study of her pen, but he had always done it. Why not? Because the homework was to identify one thing I wanted that was not on my schedule. He paused. I identified it in session 5. I have been identifying it every session since. The homework is complete. The answer has not changed. Felix, the answer is this room. The pen stopped. I have been thinking about the sessions, he said, in a way that is not therapeutic. Ruth's pen stopped. I have been thinking about them in the car on the way here. I have been thinking about them in the car on the way home. I have been thinking about them at 3 in the morning when I should be attending to correspondence, except that I have not attended to correspondence in 4 months because I have been thinking about what you said about the postcards, about Theodora giving you the sun, about the way you said, especially those, when I asked if you cared about clients with single-color pie charts. He turned his ring, faster than she'd ever seen it. I have read your published work. I have annotated your methodology. I have noticed that you tap your pen in 3 patterns and push your hair back with your left hand, and keep a blue rubber band around postcards from people you helped decades ago. He paused. These are not observations a client makes about his therapist. Felix, I need to terminate the therapeutic relationship. The room went still. Not the dead stillness, the ringing stillness of a bell that had just been struck. Why? Ruth said. And her voice was steady because 93 years of clinical training made it steady, but her hands had gone flat on the notebook, the way his hands used to go flat on the chair, and she recognized the posture because she had diagnosed it in him. Because I cannot sit in this chair and describe my feelings to you, while the predominant one is about the person asking me to describe them. She didn't speak. You asked me, in session 5, when the last time was that I did something because I wanted to. I could not answer. I can answer now. He looked at her. The managed mode was gone. Not cracked, voluntarily lowered, like a drawbridge he had chosen to open. The answer is coming here. The answer is every session. The answer is that I have been showing up to therapy because I wanted to see you. And that is not what therapy is for. And I am unwilling to continue pretending otherwise. Felix, I need you to understand the ethical. I understand the ethics. A therapist cannot have a personal relationship with a client. I am removing the obstacle. I am not your client. Effective immediately. You can't just, I can. I am a 700-year-old king. I can do most things. That's not how this, Dr. Ashmore. He leaned forward, not with a predator intensity, with something quieter, more dangerous. Ruth, I have been alive for 700 years. I have attended state dinners, arbitrated wars, signed treaties that shape the borders of nations. I have never, in that time, been as interested in anything as I am in the specific pattern of your pen against your notebook. This is not a clinical observation. This is not therapeutic engagement. This is, I don't have a word for it. The feelings wheel has several. The feelings wheel is inadequate. She almost smiled. Almost. Her eyes were bright. I am going to leave now, he said. He stood. I am going to find a different therapist. I am going to complete the therapeutic mandate with someone who is not. He turned the ring. I am going to do this correctly. And then I am going to ask you to dinner. You can't eat dinner. I am aware of the irony. He walked to the door, stopped, didn't turn around. The bread, he said. In session 6, you asked me to hold it, and I felt something for the first time in decades. But it was not the bread. It was that you noticed I had stopped feeling, and you cared enough to hand me something rough and simple and real. I would like to have dinner with the person who did that. The dinner is beside the point. He left. Ruth sat in the empty room. The pen was on the table, the notebook was open. Her hand was shaking, the ghost memory of a body that had once been human and had never fully forgotten how to tremble when something mattered. She picked up her phone. She called Dr. Amara Okonkwo. Amara, I need to refer a client. Which one? Ruth closed her eyes. 93 years of clinical training, 93 years of professional distance, 93 years of being the person who helped and never the person who was seen. The one I'm in love with, she said. On the other end, Amara Okonkwo, who had been a therapist for 60 years and had heard most things, was quiet for a moment. Then, send me the file. And Ruth? Yes? The fact that he terminated first tells me he's further along than you think. Ruth hung up. She looked at the feelings wheel pinned to the board behind her desk, the standard one, not Felix's 3-emotion version, and for the first time in 93 years of clinical practice, she could not find the word for what she was feeling. Then she looked at Felix's version, which she had kept. Adequate, inadequate, undetermined, undetermined. She understood the word now. Oswald was in the car. Felix got in. He did not speak for 3 blocks. How did it go? Oswald asked. I quit. You quit therapy? I terminated the therapeutic relationship. Felix, you can't just. I have been informed of that. I did it anyway. Why? Felix looked out the window. The city moved past. For the first time in months, he appeared to be watching it. Because the most important thing in my life was happening in that room, he said. And it wasn't therapy. Oswald pulled over. He opened his journal. Under emotional growth milestones, he wrote, he quit therapy. He quit therapy because he's in love with his therapist. He said the most important thing in his life was happening in that room, and it wasn't therapy. I am upgrading my projections. He sat with the pen in his hand. Then he added, also, he used the word love unprompted. He said it like it was a new word in a language he was learning. He said it like it was undetermined. I think undetermined might be his word for hope. Chapter 5. The Dinner. 3 things happened in the weeks after Felix walked out of Ruth's office. First, he called Dr. Amara Okonkwo. Dr. Okonkwo. My name is Felix Halloway. I was referred by Dr. Ruth Ashmore. Mr. Halloway, I've heard of you. I imagine you have. I should tell you, I don't do court mandates. My practice is voluntary only. That is why I'm calling. This is voluntary. When would you like to come in? Tomorrow. I have a council session first. Second, the council. He walked in wearing the expression of a man who had done several things recently that he had never done before, and intended to do several more. The therapeutic mandate, Felix said without sitting. The council required an evaluation. The evaluation is complete. I am terminating the mandate. Your Majesty, the terms specify, I am continuing therapy voluntarily, with a therapist of my choosing. This is now an act of the Crown, not a condition of service. Silence. Furthermore, he set a document on the table. I am establishing a formal precedent. Therapeutic privilege. No council, no court body, no political authority within my jurisdiction may access, surveil, or interfere with the therapeutic relationship of any vampire. The therapeutic process is sovereign. It belongs to the individual. On what grounds? On the grounds that I attended therapy and it worked. And every vampire in this court should have the same right, without it being a mandate or a condition or a political instrument. He paused. I am naming it the Ashmore provision. After your therapist. After the woman who told me adequate was not a feeling. I believe she was correct. He slid the document to the counsel chair. Objections may be filed through standard procedural channels. The forms are extensive. I am told they involve paperwork. He turned to leave. Oswald fell into step beside him. In the corridor, the Ashmore provision, Oswald said. Yes. You named a legal precedent after her. It seemed appropriate. Is this a grand gesture? It is a policy decision based on sound therapeutic principles. Is it also a grand gesture? Felix walked 3 more steps. It is not a grand gesture. Felix. Yes. That's a feeling. If you call it a feeling, I am demoting you. It's a feeling. You are demoted. I am not demoted. I am strongly considering it. You would have to file the paperwork yourself. Felix looked at him, and then, for the first time in longer than Oswald could measure, the corner of Felix's mouth moved. Not the ghost memory, an actual smile. Small, reluctant, real. That, Oswald said quietly, is going on the chart. Third, 3 weeks later. He asked Oswald to drive him to Ruth's practice, after hours. Oswald pulled up to the building, looked at Felix in the rear-view mirror. Felix was holding a single piece of paper and wearing an expression that Oswald had never seen on him in 400 years. It was, if Oswald had to file it under the feelings wheel categories he had spent months studying, somewhere between determined and terrified. Do you want me to wait? Yes. What if she says no? I have prepared counter-arguments. What if she says yes? Felix considered this. I have not prepared for that. You prepared counter-arguments but not a plan for success? Success seemed presumptuous. Oswald looked at him in the mirror. Felix, you are a 700-year-old king who has just named a law after this woman. You resolved Marchetti in a car. You created a feelings wheel with 3 emotions. You warmed a blood bag for the first time in 9 years because she told you to take care of yourself. Your point? Go inside. Ruth's practice. The waiting room was dark. 3 chairs, the water cooler, the landscape print. The light was off. She was finishing notes. Her pen moved in the handwriting of a woman who had spent 93 years being clinical and was tired of being clinical about the one thing that was not. The door opened. She heard the absence first. The particular quality of silence that filled a room when Felix was in it. A chair creaked. She came out. He was in the same chair, 15 minutes early for an appointment that didn't exist. His fingers were tapping a quiet rhythm on the armrest. He was holding a single sheet of paper. He stood. I have a different therapist, he said. Dr. Okonkwo. She is very good. I am using the word correctly this time. I know, she called me. I am not your client. No. The Ashmore provision was published in the Court Gazette. Oswald made sure you received a copy. You named a legal precedent after me. It seemed appropriate. It's a law, Felix. Technically a self-executing precedent. You wrote a law about therapy and named it after your former therapist. The distinction is important. He turned the ring, slowly. I would like to take you to dinner. You can't eat dinner. I am aware of the irony. You're asking me on a date. I am asking you on a date. You quit therapy 3 weeks ago. You quit therapy and then you named a law after me, and now you're asking me on a date? When you list the sequence, it does sound, It sounds like you, Felix. It sounds exactly like you. He looked at her. She was leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed and her pen still in her hand, and this specific expression he had catalogued across 11 sessions. The one where her clinical precision was fighting with something warmer, and the warm thing was winning. Dr. Okonkwo said I should ask you to dinner, he said. She used the phrase with what I believe was professional exasperation. She said, and I am quoting, "Felix, stop annotating your feelings and go ask her." I like Dr. Okonkwo. Everyone likes Dr. Okonkwo. She looked at the paper in his hand. What's on the paper? I prepared counter-arguments, in case you said no. You prepared counter-arguments for a date. I have had 700 years to prepare counter-arguments. Dr. Okonkwo calls it a control mechanism rooted in avoidance of vulnerability. I told her it was rooted in being correct. She did not agree. Show me. He hesitated. For a man who had ruled courts and stared down council members without blinking, the hesitation was enormous. He handed her the paper. 3 categories. Category 1, ethical considerations. She was no longer his therapist. The boundary no longer applied. He had verified this with Dr. Okonkwo, who had said, "Go, have dinner, stop annotating things." Category 2, practical considerations. He had identified 17 restaurants. He could not eat at any of them. Oswald had warned him not to stare as though she were the last person on earth, which he could not promise but would attempt. Category 3 had one line. I would like to try. Ruth read it again. This is a very well-organized document, she said. Her voice was not entirely steady. I have had practice. Category 3 has one line. It seemed sufficient. She folded the paper, put it in her pocket. I have a condition, she said. Name it. You let me pick the restaurant. I cannot evaluate the quality of no peer review, no annotations, no corrections, no inventing a rating scale. He considered this with the expression of a man making a significant diplomatic concession. Agreed. Under protest. Noted. She got her coat. She turned off the light. When she came back, he was standing in the waiting room with the streetlight on his ring and the expression she had filed, in a locked drawer, in a category she had not named until 3 weeks ago, since the first time she'd seen it break through his composure. Undetermined. Ready? She said. I have been ready for some time. How long? Approximately session 5. She laughed. He watched her laugh with 700 years of attention focused on the specific way her face changed when something surprised her. You know, she said, when I started this practice, I told myself I would never get personally involved with a client. I am not your client. You were. I was also the worst one you've ever had. Second worst. The Occitan man held that position for 6 sessions. I had a color-coded notebook. He had 14th century grammar. I made a pie chart with one emotion. He recited Catullus at me for an hour. I invented a clinical rigor scale and used it to grade you. Okay, she said, you're the worst. He offered her his arm, an old-world gesture from a man who had been a peasant 7 centuries ago and had learned every formal courtesy available to a king and was now using them on a woman who had once told him to blink. She took it. 2 vampires, black band rings catching the streetlight, walking toward a restaurant where only one of them would eat. He was asking about the menu. She was telling him he wasn't allowed to annotate it. He was informing her that he had opinions about wine despite being unable to consume wine. She was informing him that having opinions about things he couldn't consume was, technically, his entire personality. He considered this. That is not inaccurate, he said. It's also not a feeling. No, he said. And then, quieter, with the weight of a man who had spent 700 years calling everything adequate and was just now learning what the other words were for. But I'm working on it. Oswald's journal, Final entry. He went to her office. He brought counter-arguments organized by category. She said yes. They went to dinner. He cannot eat dinner. He went anyway. I asked him how it went. He said, "She ordered wine. I had opinions. She told me I was not allowed to annotate the menu. I annotated the menu. She was not surprised." I asked him if he was happy. He considered the question for a very long time. "Undetermined," he said, but he was smiling when he said it. I am closing this journal. Not because the milestones have stopped, because they are no longer mine to track. He stayed. He chose to stay. Not for the court, not for the mandate, not for me. For a woman who told him anger was a feeling, and that adequate was not enough, and that he should blink. He is blinking. I am cautiously upgrading my projections to optimistic.